22 big corporations you never knew about. Involved in slavery. Welcome back to Candor Stories. In today's video, we'll explore some well-known corporations and institutions that profited from slavery. Prepare to be enlightened as we delve into their connections to this painful past. After the abolition of slavery in Great Britain, the sum of £20 million, now worth almost £2.4 billion if adjusted for inflation, was borrowed by the government from financial markets and used to compensate slave owners, an amount which was 40% of the total government expenditure for 1834. It was not until February 2015 that this debt was finally repaid by taxpayers, including the descendants of the slaves. But this money wasn't shared amongst every British citizen at that time. Here is a list of founders and their corporations who benefited from the slave compensation. The first on our list is J.P. Morgan Chase. Between 1831 and 1865, two of J.P. Morgan's predecessor banks, Citizens Bank and Canal Bank in Louisiana, accepted approximately 13,000 enslaved individuals as collateral on loans and took ownership of approximately 1,250 of them when the plantation owners defaulted on the loans. Number 2. Benjamin Green. Green handed control of his Suffolk brewery to his son Edward in 1836, and in 1887, after merging with Frederick King, they changed their name to Green King. Green was friends with Sir Patrick Blake and manager of Patrick's Sugar Plantation Holdings in the West Indies. He threw himself, with enormous vigor, into representing the interests of the West Indian slave proprietors at a critical juncture of their affairs. When slavery was abolished by the British government in 1833, Green was one of 47,000 people who benefited from the government's decision to compensate Britons who had lost properties. By property, we mean men, women and children slaves. According to University College London (UCL), he was awarded £483,308 in today's money. Number 3. Barclays Bank. Barclays, the British multinational banking and financial services company headquartered in London, United Kingdom, conceded that companies it bought over the years may have been involved in the slave trade. They merged with Colonial Bank in 1925. 2 managers, a subscriber and 3 directors are named on the UCL database as having been involved in the slave trade or received slave compensation. Number 4. Norfolk Southern. The Mobile and Girard Company, which is now part of Norfolk Southern, offered slaveholders $180, worth $3,379 today, apiece for enslaved Africans. The Central of Georgia Railway, another company aligned with Norfolk Southern, valued its slaves at $31,303, worth $663,033 today, on record. Number 5. The Canadian National Railway Company. The Canadian National Railway is headquartered in Montreal, Quebec. It serves Canada and the Midwestern and Southern United States. The company also has a history in which it benefited from slavery through the Mobile and Ohio, which is now part of Canadian National. Mobile and Ohio valued their slaves lost to the war and emancipation at $199,691, an amount which is currently worth $2.2 million. Number 6. Brown Brothers Harriman. Brown Brothers Harriman is the oldest and largest private investment bank and securities firm in the United States. According to USA Today, this bank, formerly known as the New York Merchant Bank of James and William Brown, owned hundreds of enslaved Africans and financed the cotton economy by lending millions to Southern planters, merchants and cotton brokers. Number 7. Brooks Brothers. Brooks Brothers, the high-end suit retailer, got their start selling slave clothing to various slave traders back in the 1800s. Number 8. New York Life Insurance Company. New York Life Insurance Company is the largest mutual life insurance company in the United States. Their predecessor company, the Nautilus Insurance Company, also took part in slavery by selling insurance policies to enslaved Africans to insure their enslaved persons against damages or death. According to USA Today, evidence of 10 more New York Life slave policies came from their 1847 account book. Number 9. American International Group. USA Today reported that New York-based AIG completed the purchase of American General Financial Group, a Houston-based insurer that owns U.S. Life Insurance Company. A U.S. life policy on an enslaved African living in Kentucky was reprinted in a 1935 article about slave insurance in the American Conservationist magazine. AIG says it has found documentation indicating U.S. Life insured enslaved Africans. Number 10. NatWest Bank. Two partners Abel Smith and George Robert Smith were owners of a company named Payne & Smith, which is now part of the bank NatWest. Were involved in claims relating to estates in Jamaica and British Guiana which are worth a combined £2.2 million today. Number 11. Lloyd of London. The database showed that Simon Fraser, a founder-subscriber member of insurer Lloyd's of London, was paid nearly £400,000 in today's money to surrender an estate in Dominica. Lloyd's also acquired Berwick, Lechmere and Company, whose founder, Joseph Berwick, was the mortgage holder for slavery estates in the Virgin Islands. His son-in-law, Sir Anthony Lechmere, was awarded compensation for 286 enslaved people in the Virgin Islands, totaling £489,985 in today's money, and was an investor in the bank. Number 12. HSBC Bank. HSBC Bank is linked to the compensation scheme through George Pollard, the first manager of the London Joint Stock Bank, which was later absorbed by Midland Bank and eventually merged into HSBC. George Pollard was the trustee over a claim regarding Colhounds estate in Nevis, for which compensation was paid totaling £289,586 in today's money. Number 13. Danske Bank. In Northern Ireland, Danske Bank has links to slavery through Frederick Harvey Garraway, who was awarded compensation for 8 claims over estates in Dominica at the equivalent sum today of £905,150. Garraway invested in the Belfast Banking Company, which became Northern Bank before it was acquired by Danske Bank. Number 14. P&O. Shipping company P&O, now owned by DP World, can also trace its roots to slavery through Joseph Christopher Hewitt. Joseph Christopher Hewitt, who later became a director of P&O Steam Navigation Company, along with others was awarded compensation for Long Lane Dillap's estate in Antigua as mortgagees in trust. The total compensation they received is worth £334,336 in today's money. Number 15. Lehman Brothers. Lehman Brothers, whose business empire started in the slave trade, recently admitted their part in the business of slavery. According to the Sun-Times, the financial services firm acknowledged recently that its founding partners owned not one, but several enslaved Africans during the Civil War era. Number 16. Aetna International. Aetna International is the United States' largest health insurer. They apologized for selling policies in the 1850s that reimbursed slave owners for financial losses when the enslaved Africans they owned died. Number 17. Wells Fargo. USA Today reported that Wachovia Corporation, now owned by Wells Fargo, has apologized for its ties to slavery after disclosing that 2 of its historical predecessors owned enslaved Africans and accepted them as payment. Number 18. USA Today. USA Today has found that their own parent company, E.W. Scripps and Gannett, has had links to the slave trade. Number 19. Fleet Boston. There is evidence that Fleet Boston evolved from an earlier financial institution, Providence Bank, founded by John Brown, who was a slave trader and owned ships used to transport enslaved Africans. This bank financed Brown's slave voyages and profited from them. Brown even reportedly helped charter what became Brown University. Number 20. CSX Corporation. CSX used slave labor to construct portions of some U.S. rail lines under the political and legal system that was in place more than a century ago. 2 enslaved Africans whom the company rented were identified as John Henry and Reuben. CSX charged $200, which is the equivalent to $3,800 today, to rent an individual enslaved African. Number 21. RSA Insurance. According to the Telegraph, 5 company directors and a governor of London Assurance, which was merged into Sun Insurance in 1959 and eventually RSA Insurance in 2008, are named as claimants beneficiaries of the 1834 Slave Compensation Scheme. Number 22. Royal Bank of Scotland (RBS). RBS conceded in a report in 2009 that individuals who were partners or directors of Royal Bank of Scotland Group may have owned slaves themselves or been otherwise directly connected to slave enterprises in the British West Indies. In 2006, RBS's US arm, Citizens and Charter One, pledged $5 million to support local economic and educational initiatives for African American communities. A further $2 million will pay for scholarships for African Americans over the next 4 years. These connections to slavery remind us of the deep and lasting impact this dark chapter in history has had on various facets of our society. It's crucial to acknowledge these historical ties as we strive for